Okay. The purpose of my builder's call today is communication. I'm going to get very detailed, more detailed about the techniques of communication. Very detailed. I'm going to get into techniques I've used for years, bond and rapport techniques, influencing techniques. I kind of hesitate doing it. Oh, Nikita's husband passed. Woo! That's rocking. All right, Nikita. Okay. Part of this is I never have gone into detail. I've gone into some detail, but I'm going to take this track over the next few weeks to go into super in-depth detail on influence. And part of it is there's some secrets, okay? Some secrets Andy Albright uses and some secrets I use to influence people. Now, some of these techniques, I gotta say this right. Some of these techniques can be looked at as manipulation, and it actually you can manipulate people. But I like to call it influence. You can influence your clients, like seriously, man. With some of these techniques, you can do some powerful influencing. Actually, if you get really, like if you're a master at these techniques, like delve into the depth of it, you can actually be very manipulative in a negative way. There's an ethical use of these techniques too. So kind of interesting, they teach an ethical use of these techniques, meaning that you could actually do it for, not so good purposes. But I'm talking about influencing for good, okay? So like a force for good, maybe that's the theme. Partly also is I don't like to give up my secrets, okay? And maybe I still can keep some for myself. Like you won't hear Andy teaching this stuff. He wants you to kind of get it, but it's almost like he doesn't want you to see, kind of like the Wizard of Oz, right? What's behind the curtain? That's why I talk about the green door or whatever, all those little games to learn how to do this kind of thing. Man, I had this whole thing that I was going to. Now I'm kind of self-editing. Okay. I'm gonna give stuff to you that you can use like right now, that you can use immediately, and I'm only going to take it so far where you can be effective in recruiting, you be effective in sales, but I'm not going to take it to another level because that's the level I'm going to keep for myself. No, seriously, I'm going to get you effective. Okay. I'm going to stop now. I'm going to edit that part out of the video. All right, man. I've studied this stuff for years and years and years, 20 years. And I wonder if this, okay, that kind of works. All right, man. How many people are on here? Oh, geez, 22. Okay. Okay, let's get started. I'm not going to try to be long on this, but I want to give you stuff you can use, but it takes work. Okay, so let me just say this, man. The stuff I'm going to teach you takes freaking work. I've worked years on it, and I find I slip in and out. But it takes a lot of conscious effort to do this when it comes to relating to people using these techniques. Now, some of y'all think we're poor and communicating with someone, I've been communicating all my life. It's like, no, you have not. You've limited yourself, your ability to communicate with a certain type of people. Like, do you know that there are some people, what is that? Oh, wow. Someone's trying to call me. My kitty's going to the doctor, the veterinarian. she's got like an inner ear infection and she's wobbling. She can hardly, anyway. So I'm watching for Ginny's thing. Okay. So this whole track here is on communicating and affecting people and influencing people in a very specific technical way. Because it's all based on kind of the way humans work. Okay, a lot of things people do is they separate the mind and the body. They assume the model of, that's what's in your mind, but what your mind and your body do work in concert. And a lot of the way that you are is expressed in how you speak, right? The language that you use is an indicator of how you think. Okay, so let me, I'm going to draw out just some basics. I'm going to get into a lot of detail, but just I want you to understand, okay, reality. Okay, there is an objective reality. Things happen in the world that is reality. Now, some people think that the reality is in your head and there's no objective reality. Reality is only what's in your head. And that's not really true. I'm not going to get crazy because that's some philosophical stuff, right? But it's important for you to understand how the basis of what I'm going to teach you is based on the fact that there's an objective reality. There's the true world and what happens in it. All right? Okay? Then there's the way that you interact with this world. So this is you. And you experience reality. And then what you do with the experience of reality is you represent it in your brain. Okay? It's called, like when you're a child, it's basically mind mapping. Your mind works like creating associations. Okay, like when this happens, this is how I feel about how this happens. Okay, and how I saw that, how I heard it, all the sensory aspects of you create what's in your mind about what has happened to you. I wish I could articulate this well, okay? But throughout your experience as a child growing up, it's all about understanding the world around you and then creating a representation of that in your mind so that you make sense of it. Okay, it's like in the Bible when Jesus cured the sight of that blind man who's been blind since birth. And they asked him, so can you see? He says, I see trees. He sees people as trees. Well, because his mind hasn't mapped what is a tree and what is a human being and what is, right? And the only way that you can understand how someone represents the world is how they talk about it. All right? So and this is why when two people experience the same thing, they're going to describe it differently because their reality and how they perceive that reality, how they think about that reality, and how it makes them feel is represented differently between two different people. As an example, the destruction of the Twin Towers. Okay, and I use something very horrific because if I ask each one of you describe one sentence about that event, what do you remember about it most? Describe it for me. Okay. Y'all are going to talk about it. You're all going to talk about it in a particular way because you experience it different. Like, let's just say, for example, someone who was there and saw it, they will tell you, and this is sort of a representation pattern that how they experience reality. They'll say, oh, man, it was this most horrific sound I ever heard. It was this crashing, and then all of a sudden that crumbling, you could hear it was the loudest noise. It sounded like a freight train and thunder at the same time. And I never heard anything like it. Okay, that's one person's representation, initial memory of how they remember it. Okay. You have another person said, oh my God, when I saw those planes crash into the towers, and then all of a sudden I just saw smoke, and the smoke was billowing out, and I saw little things of fire. Then all of a sudden, minutes later, the whole thing just started crumbling like Legos, and then all this dust and just kind of billowed out. And it was the most horrific thing I've ever seen in my life. Okay, that's another way to do it. Then you have a third person, the exact same, they could be sitting, watching it in the exact same location, will describe it. Oh my gosh. It's the most horrific thing that I felt just totally out of control. When that plane crashed in it, I have never felt that thunder, felt that vibration. It made the whole world shake around me like I didn't know what was going on. Okay. So notice 3 different ways of describing the same thing, and in their minds, okay, the reality of what happened is reality, okay, but how these three different people saw it was described differently, wasn't it? Okay. They experience the same reality differently. And so in their minds, they remember it differently. And if they describe it to you, you probably really understood only one of them. Like, you can get the other 2, but you really grooved on the one that was like, oh man, I never saw anything like it. And so so to backtrack, the first person I talked about was visual. I mean, I kind of made it obvious, right? The next one was auditory, because I described the words as in sounds. And then the next one is kinesthetic, feeling. So this was feeling, this was sound, and this was, sight type stuff. You can always hear how someone is and how they represent the world. It's called primary thinking style. It's how they represent the world. Okay. And what happens is how they represent the world affects how they feel. Okay. It's a language. It's a language pattern that is very evident. Okay. So people describe things they remember visually more so. Now, everyone uses all their senses to experience the world, but some have we're talking primary thinking pattern. Okay. Some people hear stuff and they process the world through hearing, and some people are feelers. Okay. So if you remember, if you remember the activity called Paul and Sam Minichino. Okay, so I was just cracking up because it was clearly their primary thought pattern, their thought process. Okay, clearly Paul is kinesthetic. He's a feeler. How do I know that? He said, do this. Words you use like, do this. I feel like, okay, that would mean a lot to me. You're better off. Hey, we were fired up. He cares about us. Scratch and claw. I don't mess around. I love you. Do something. All those words were feeling words. Is that cool? It's like just clearly just popped out. If you're listening and monitoring how he's describing stuff, all those words pop out. Now, if you personally are a feeler, those words mean something more to you. So you probably grooved on Minichino. He was talking to you, man. Like you felt like, oh my God, man, he's awesome. the reason why he's awesome is because he spoke your language. If you're kinesthetic and you tend to use those words. See, now the thing is, you don't know how you are because you hardly listen to yourself speak, and you just use the words that you always use, right? It's just natural for you. But it's harder for you to listen to someone else and monitor the words they use. Okay, and this is why certain people, certain speakers, you just totally, golly, man, I really like that guy. I really like I like that. And you don't know why that is, but one of the biggest reasons is because they're speaking your same language, right? So Paul Menachino is a kinesthetic. Okay, now Sam Menachino, she's different. Okay, she is a visual. She uses see a lot. Well, when you see your husband, like when I see Paul dialing, man, I think he's sexy when he dials. All her words she's so visual. Now again, we're talking majority. Everyone processes the world through their senses. Everyone has aspects of all these, but you have a primary one that you intake information. Does that make sense? So if I were going to try to talk to Paul, if I was Paul Menachino's upline, right, and I was trying to influence him, how I'd influence him is, like, dude, can you imagine what it feels like to be recognized on stage as a new EVP? Like, can you just see yourself on stage and imagine how powerful that is, how that your heart starts beating faster, right? And that you're tingling in your fingers as they raise your hands up. EVP, Paul and Sam Menachino, can imagine that feeling of accomplishment. How would that feel to you, right? He'd be so fired up. I would have the same conversation. Now, so when I'm talking to Sam, I'll say, Sam, what would it look like to you raising your hands on stage? Can you see yourself? Can you hear? Okay, that's auditory. Hear the people. Can you see the people clapping for you? Can you see them rising up? Ah, man, talk about the colors. You can almost see the confetti. You know, I mean, she's got, oh my God. And Paul's going, oh my God. And I talk to them because I use their language. I use their language, man. That's what we're talking about. It is such a subtle form of influence. Again, I'm trying to say it from the manipulation word, but like seriously, using some of this stuff, you can totally manipulate people huge. But influencing in a positive way, so we'll say influence. So you can influence people by how you talk to them. Influencing your client by talking their language. So as I mentioned, there's this aspect of how you think can also manifest in your physicality. Okay, and this is really cool. You think this is Jedi mind tricks, man. This is Jedi mind tricks, like seriously, right? So, well, let me kind of put this map together. So I want you to understand the map. Okay, so the map of communication. Okay, so most people think that you communicate to another person. All look like Pac-Mans, I know. Okay, and you think that the map of communication, a lot of people, I'll just say not you, but, okay, so what you're thinking in your brain, you think, okay, and then what you do is you speak. So what you think is you speak, and then your speak is received in their ear, and then from what they hear goes into their brain. Okay, and so because you think a thought and then you articulate it and they hear it and it goes into the brain, you won't automatically assume that communication occurred. Okay, communication happened because I said communication happened. I said it to you. I mean, come on, you know what I mean, right? I love when you say, you know what I mean? Sometimes you say that too because you assume they do, and other people use it. Does that make sense to you? Do you know what I mean? Did you hear what I said? How's that feel to you? I know I'm doing it again. I'm doing it, all these things again. Okay, I'll talk about that later. Here's how it really works. It's like a decoder ring. You know how you had a decoder ring in a spy decoder ring, and then if you kind of turned it to the one side, and then you start writing all these gibberish letters, but those letters map to the real letters. And then the person on the other side had the same decoder ring. They could look at the letters and translate it to what the letters really meant. So what the code came out, the code you received, then no one in the middle, if they didn't have the decoder ring, could understand it. Okay, it's just like how encryption, that's how encryption works. It gets encoded, and then on the other side gets decoded so you can understand it. Well, that's actually how communication works. All right, so there's a middle step here called encode your thoughts. You bring it out here, and then there's this decode process from hearing it, decode, and then the brain understanding it. It's that extra step people don't understand. And this is where your power in communication happens, is understanding the encoding and decoding process. Right? So really, and if you've heard this through John Maxwell, everyone communicates, but few people connect. So we're talking about the connection. You know, the falsity of communication is thinking that it happened. It didn't happen unless the person represented what you represent in your head. Your thought is represented in their mind as the same thought that you intended. Right? This is huge. Okay, so I mean, let me say it again. You think about something, you decide how you want to say it. The other person hears what you said. They have to decide how to decode what you said to represent it in their own brain. And sometimes the two don't meet with each other. All right? Because they're using a different decoder ring than you're using. Okay? Your encoding ring is different than their decoding ring. And that's where communication gets messed up all the dadgum time. And you're wondering, gosh, how come I can't relate to this person I'm trying to sell to? It's like I'm speaking Chinese. Well, because you are. They don't understand what you're trying to say because you're trying to say it in a way they don't understand it. And it's subtle. It is a subtle thing. Right? Something that you'll have no clue. You'll feel like, dadgum, man. You're frustrated, right? You're frustrated. You don't see how this could have went wrong because you thought you did everything you needed to do. I mean, you hear yourself talking, and what they're saying to you, you just don't understand. How did they get that from what I said? Okay, now I just did it again, didn't I? I talked about seeing, hearing, and feeling. Anyway, I'm messing with you. I'm totally messing with you. That's what I'm talking about. I'm messing with you because I know that some of you out there are kinesthetic feelers. Some of you are visual people, and some of you are auditory. So I'm trying to speak your language because I'm not going to assume that you can only understand visual words. I'm trying to use all the words. I'm drilling down into another level of presentation. Presentation, like an opportunity meeting, way more complex than some of y'all think if you want to appeal to everyone in the room. If you only want to appeal to like half the room or a third of the room, then just keep not thinking about it. It's kind of like your clients. It's like, golly, Alex, I can't get to 50% closing rate because I only seem to close 25%. It's because the 25% you're closing are kinesthetic people that feel, and you're a kinesthetic person. And when you're grooving in your kinesthetic style of communicating, they're grooving with you. But the visual person, you're doing your kinesthetic thing on them, and they have no idea what you're saying. And you're like clueless. You're thinking it's going on, but they're like, they don't get you, man. and then you don't close them because they're like, you don't have the rapport down, right? And you thought you were trying to influence them, you had zero effectivity. Does that make sense? Like seriously, this comes down to like straight up technique, because your brain, God made your brain to work like this. So if you know how to press the right buttons, gang, then you can influence people way more than you're doing now. It's like, golly, Alex, the first time I ever heard this. Yeah. So now let's do something about it. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, this stuff is just really crazy. Okay. It's once you learn it and start using it and hearing people, man, you're going to be more powerful, like double the power of influence, just even knowing this stuff, but you got to use it too. Okay. Let me say this too. Again, okay, I'm going to do this technique called reframing. So I'm going to do it on you, okay, and I'm going to tell you the technique I'm using to do it on you, okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to think differently about failure. Everyone thinks if they can't accomplish a result that they failed. It's like, Alex, I just cannot book. I just can't book appointments. I'm having the hardest time booking appointments. I'm just failing at this. Or I can't close them. I get in there, but I can't close them. I'm just failing. Oh, I suck. It's like, oh, man. Okay. So let me help you represent that differently in your brain. All right. It's reframing. Let's reframe that to something positive. Do you know that every failure is not a failure? Failure is a feedback. Failure is feedback. In other words, how do you know you can get better if you keep not knowing what you did wrong, right? It's knowing what you did wrong and how you can improve it is where the success happens. So failure is not failure. Failure is feedback. Okay? So listen to what I just said. Failure is not failure. Failure is feedback. It's feedback. You get to monitor your results, and then from those results, you get to change what you're doing. So I never view failure as negative. I view feedback as positive. Okay, so here's what it looks like. It's this loop. You can only control what you do. You do something, and then you get a result. The result can go one of two ways. If it's a positive result, okay, then you get the feedback to continue to do that positive thing that caused that result. Okay, this thing. This is what you do, you get a result. So the part of what you did to get a positive result is feedback. Okay, the feedback loop back to you to understand, hey, that worked, I'm going to continue doing that. Likewise, if it's what you say is a negative result, okay, now you got to define result. You got to always define the outcome of how you can measure whether your success is fair. So the result is a covered family. We helped a family. Okay, so if you didn't cover a family, again, you got to define the outcome, very specific. Did I help a family or not? Okay, and covered family, you define it further. It's issue paid, stays on the books, they're a client for life. Okay, that's my definition, placement of persistency, right? So if a negative thing happens where I don't cover the family, or I don't get it issue paid because it got declined, or it got issue paid but they canceled it 6 months later, if any of those things happen, then that's not the result I want. And some people look at it as fair. I just look at it as a feedback. So whatever happens here is feedback, and then I can change it. Do you see how that works? And you'll know it. You'll feel it. Because you'll feel like, golly, that went way, like I thought it was going to happen, but it didn't happen. And you're processing it like that. That feel right. I thought it felt right, but it didn't feel right. And then you think about it, oh man. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change finding the pain so that when I get the result, then I'll know it when I feel it. When I feel like it's the right thing to do because the result was happening, then I'm going to remember that feeling as I go through the ATM. And that's the feeling I want to create with the client. Because every time I did that, created that feeling of urgency and pain, I always got a positive outcome of covering a family. But when I got a feeling like there wasn't any pain there and I couldn't develop it, it didn't feel right. And so I got a negative result. Okay. I just did it to you again. Right? I just talked about reframing, defining success and failure. And I did it to you because I communicated both visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. I know, man, I'm like getting too crazy here. Okay, only continuing the antibiotics. So our kitty's on kitty antibiotics. So I guess that's a good thing. Okay, is this kind of making sense to you? Do you understand what I'm trying to convey? Are you, do you see how this can work for you? All right. Okay, now if you're good at monitoring, you'll know exactly what I just did just then, right? And this is how you've got to listen to your clients. You need to listen to your clients, picking out those words they're using to describe stuff. Like, as an example, creating bond and rapport, one of the great questions I ask a couple is, so tell me, how did you guys meet? Now, you might think it's to create bond and rapport because I want them to feel good. Actually, no. That's the surface level. It sounds good to you when I'm training it. But here's what I'm drill it down deeper. Here's what I'm trying to accomplish. I want to see how they describe that memory. One of the best ways to determine their primary thinking style is how they describe a memory. So, okay, so let's go through an example. So the husband says, oh man, it was pretty crazy. You know, I saw her from across the bar and I thought, you know, she's kind of cute. She's kind of cute. So I kind of came up to her and she was like holding her drink, just staring at her drink. And so I come up to her. I said, hey, do you come here often? I've never seen you here before. And she said, oh, you know, this is my first time here. And I said, oh, really? Would you like me to show you around? I thought that was a slick line, you know. And he started laughing. And she says, no, that's not how it happened. I was just sitting there listening to the music. And I was just kind of grooving to the music. And then all of a sudden I hear this guy come up to me and put this lame line on me. I mean, it was like, this is just a lame line. So I started laughing. And it was really one of those kind of loud laughs out loud. It could have embarrassed him, but anyway. But his voice was a kind voice. And I thought, man, you know, maybe I'll give this guy a chance. Because he sounds like, you know, a kind person. Okay, it's pretty obvious, right? The guy's visual and she's auditory. And so throughout the appointment, nailed it. I decoded them. I decoded their brain. So now when I talk to him about life insurance, I'm going to ask him, so Joe, tell me how it'd make you feel if your wife and family wasn't covered with this protection. Like, describe that for me. What would that look like to you? What would that look like to you? And then he'd be all over it. Then I go to Mary. So tell me, what does it sound like? When that happens, I mean, let me hear what your thoughts are on that. So what I'm doing is I'm talking to them. I'm going to talk to her like she's auditory because I'm going to use auditory words. And I'll talk to him like he's visual. Now, gang, I've been doing this a long time, so these words come out of me like water. When I first got started, it did not, because you know, anymore, I can't even remember what my primary thoughts style was because I'm all of them. I do all of them, like I try to do all of them equally. So when I describe things, I try to use all those words. If I had to guess, I was maybe more a visual, okay? when I got started, I believe. Actually, that's funny. Okay, so let's say I was visual. I would articulate everything in a visual way, but talking to an auditory person, I had to come up with the words. It's like, what are words that convey sound and hearing? And see, I had to learn those words. It was a new kind of a new vocabulary to use in conversation, because I never used those words regularly in conversation. Or a kinesthetic person, I didn't use feeling words a lot. I used them some, but I had to, when you have to use it, that's why it's so important to practice this. Okay, but the most important thing I want you to do right now is be aware of how people are. It's funny, once you know this, you're going to listen to your kids and you're going to hear how they think, because you're going to hear those visual words or auditory words. When you talk to your spouse, same thing. They're going to start, because you're aware. And now what you need to do is you need to practice that awareness all the time. So like even on conference calls, or like if I'm watching ESPN or listening to ESPN radio late at night, I'll go through the rehearsal, the practice of, how's this guy describing? Okay, now if you're on radio, they're going to be visual typically, but sometimes their primary thinking style will come out, and you'll hear them use those auditory words all the time, or their visual words all the time. But you have to practice it. So that's all I want you to do, is just be aware of it. If you're aware and you practice it, then it's easier and easier when you're listening to people. But Alex, that just means I got to work harder at listening. Oh my gosh. Yes. That's the point. It will force you to listen to people instead of thinking about what you're going to say when they're done talking. If there's anything good about these techniques, is it causes you to monitor what they're saying. And the second thing, which is probably the most important, is monitoring how they're reacting to you. See, if we can get you to monitor what you're saying and monitoring how they're reacting to you, monitoring what they're saying, and then monitoring how they're reacting to what you're saying, oh my gosh, like my job's done. Okay, but now I'm going to take it to the next level of influence, where you can manipulate the conversation to get them to feel a certain way, so you can move them to doing something to protect their families. Okay, it's all about, people do they're motivated to do something because they feel something. And so the whole power of these techniques are to get them to feel a certain way, so they'll move a certain way. You can totally manipulate, you can totally influence the direction of the interaction when you can get them to feel a certain way, to get them to move a certain way, right? Man, you learn this, baby. Oh my gosh, you will be powerful, 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 but you got to practice and use these techniques, all right? So going back to, I covered the model of communication. I reframed what failure is, it's just a feedback. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the connection between words and your physiology, your body, okay? Here's another way to know, and it's really a cool thing. This is the most fascinating thing to me. Most of the world actually is represented in the physiology of how they think, even in different languages, which is kind of cool. It's really interesting, okay? So I'm going to talk about the visual cues. There's the way that someone moves their eyes when they're either remembering something or imagining something will also give you a clue. It's physical. Like, you listen to the words, but you also watch their eyes. When you watch their eyes, they give themselves away. It's a tell. It is a total tell. This is how you can play poker and you know if someone's bluffing. That's why they put glasses on, because they know that sometimes the way their eyes move is a tell for whether they're bluffing or not. So that's why sunglasses are used by these pro poker players. They know sometimes their eyes will give them away. Well, this is why, because of these techniques. So how do you know someone's a visual? Visual, their eyes will go up. Their eyes will either go up. Actually, there's a certain way. When they're going up to your right as you're, okay, so this is as you're looking at them. When their eyes go up this way, this is what they're remembering. So when you're asking a visual person, so how did you guys meet? And then they're trying to remember, their eyes will go up like this. They're trying to remember it, okay? If their eyes go this way, they're imagining something that they're trying to imagine something that hasn't happened yet. So a visual person, if you say, well, tell them about how you met, they're going to kind of look up to the left. Well, I remember, gosh, she was the prettiest woman in the room at that party. And she was wearing this red dress that was just hot. Okay, their eyes are going to be darting up like that. If they're trying to imagine, so when you say, so have you ever been to Paris? They go, no, I've never been. Well, describe what that'd be like. Like imagine you're in front of the Eiffel Tower. Their eyes are going to go up to the right. Wow, going to the Eiffel Tower. I've seen pictures of it. Their eyes are going to dart up to the right because they're like to your left, my right, because they're imagining something that really hasn't happened yet. It's a really cool thing. It's funny. In fact, you can actually do this the opposite. So I want you guys to imagine what it would be like in Paris. So I want you to look up to your right and think about it. And you actually can visualize it better when you actually physically do it. It's a weird thing, but it works. Okay, and then the other thing is, if they're looking straight at you, you know how you have people just stare at you straight up? They just like, so when I ask them, so can you see this policy working for you? And they just stare at you. They're just straight ahead at you. But their mind is visualizing, so Joe, when you die, can you see how this money, when we write a check to your family and give it to your wife so that she can pay the house off? So he'll stare at you, then he'll look up to the right and stare at you, just stare straight ahead. He's visualizing, like his mind is like playing the picture, playing the movie, right? And doing that, he's feeling the feeling of, God, that would be so awesome if my family was protected, right? So here's how, so typically when they're darting their eyes up either way, again, you can be more refined. Like this is how you tell someone's lying to you. Like honestly, this is, okay, so this is an extra. So for your children, this how, like if you know your children are visual, this is how you know that they're lying to you. Like I use this on my kids, like way back. It's like, okay, man, who spilled this thing on the counter and didn't clean it up? And okay, so here's how I know that they're lying. Well, Daddy, they're imagining. Well, Dad, what are you talking about? They're darting up to the right. I know they're imagining that they did it, right? Okay, so so when I ask them that question, their first is going to go to the left because they're reliving that they, okay, so they're thinking about it and they're darting up to the left because then they go to the right and they're telling you, I didn't do it. I don't know who did it, Daddy. Okay, so they're imagining themselves not doing it. When they first thought about it, they're seeing themselves do it, recalling, remembering that they did it. That's how I know they're lying. All right, now the ones who didn't do it, I go, did you, they're visual. Did you spill that thing on the counter and didn't clean it up? I don't know what you're talking about. They're trying to remember. It's like, I don't know what you're talking about, Daddy. Their eyes didn't go here right away and then switch. Man, I'm getting too... Man, did I lose you? Oh, man, I lost some people. Anyway, so how do you know someone's auditory? When they're auditory, their eyes start to the left or right. Okay? So, actually, there's three ways. If they dart to the right, as you're looking at them, this is recall. They're recalling something that actually happened. If they're doing it this way, again, it's imagining something that hadn't happened. And then there's actually this, if they look down to the right, this is called internal dialogue. In other words, they're talking to themselves. Dialogue. It's actually kind of cool. You ever see people when they look down, they start repeating what you're saying? It's really weird, but have you run into someone where, you're saying something and their lips are moving? They're looking down. It's an internal feeling type. These are called, or what they're doing is they're having an internal dialogue. They're hearing them. They're repeating what you're saying in their heads, and sometimes their mouth moves. And it's an internal thing, but it's all triggered auditory. Okay. And then on kinesthetic, the feelers are the ones that look down. They just pretty much look down this way. So sometimes there's a little bit of confusion between here and here. This person looks down this way, okay? And that's for a right-handed person. Oh gosh, now I'm getting crazy. Just, again, to make it easy, they're kind of looking down, kinesthetic, they're looking side to side, auditory. If they're looking up, they're visual, okay? All I want you to do is practice listening and watching people, watching their eyes and hearing the words they use when they speak, and then you mirror back how they speak. You mirror back to them how they're talking. Man, so the first thing is to be aware of how people are, your spouse, the server at the restaurant, how they're speaking. And when your brain is active and listening to them, dang, you're rocking. And then when you can peg people out, you're rocking. Okay, and then the next step is when you try to reflect back to them the same words that they use, man, you are rocking. So that's all I have. Does anyone have any I'm going to unmute.
All participants are unmuted.
Does anyone have any questions? Okay, let me say this. Right-handed person, this works. Left-handed person, everything's opposite. So it depends on if you're right-handed or left-handed. So a right-handed person's imagining will be this way. A left person's imagining will be this way. So sometimes you have to kind of, figure out if they're right-handed or left-handed. That's all I'm going to say. All I want you to do is just understand when they're looking up, it's visual. When you're looking side to side, it's auditory. When they're looking down, they're kinesthetic, looking down to the, anyway. Anyone have any questions? I know it's a lot, but I'm going to try to step you through this because if you can master this, oh my gosh. Andy Albright kills it with this, but he doesn't want to teach it to you because he just wants you to get it, okay? And as I'm going through this, I'm thinking, golly, this took me a little bit to learn this, but I want you to learn some of the finer details of how you close. You can do this, man, and you can close a ton more than what you're doing now because you're relating to them better and you're speaking their language. So anyway, are there any questions?
Alice, it's Annette. What are you referencing?
I knew someone was going to ask that. I'm not going to release it yet because I don't want you guys to go down a rabbit hole. This is going to be a guided, specific thing over the next few weeks to kind of get you. I will release, I've got several of them, but I'm not going to let you get into it yet. I want you to start using it using it as an exercise until the next time we talk again. Okay, but I will let you know later. Okay, is that all right?
Yep.
Okay, so Ned, how do you think you are as far as auditory, visual, kinesthetic?
I think I'm visual.
Okay. So be aware of the words you use. Like it's harder to actually evaluate yourself because you just, it's hard for you to listen because you're articulating a thought and it doesn't automatically come out the way, but sometimes you'll catch yourself using visual words like, oh, wow, I just used this visual thing, you know. But anyway, any other questions?
What does it mean when the kinesthetic is looking down to the left?
Okay, okay, so a right-handed kinesthetic always looks down to the right. A right-handed person that looks down to the left when they're trying to remember something, they're an auditory person. So this is where it gets a little confusing because they have this, they're hearing themselves repeat what you're saying. Sometimes they'll move their lips. The general population, this isn't a very large percentage of the general population. Like, actually, in the United States, about 50% people, their primary thought style is visual. That's 50%, okay? In France, it's like 30% is visual. So it's interesting, even by country, they tend to have different, different general population what they are. But you got to know kind of if they're right-handed or left-handed. That'll become apparent. But that's why you need to listen to the words. So the words that they say will tell you how to relate to them. That's why you kind of have to have like two things that confirm, how they are. So you got to listen and then watch their eyes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay, so practice being aware of your clients, your kids, your spouse, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, and just listen to how they speak and then watch their eyes. They'll think you're like, why is he asking me this question? Like, honey, do you remember what colors your high school team was? And then watch where their eyes go. It's so cool. It is like so cool. Anyway, it's a parlor trick, but if you practice it, it'll be a money-making technique when you figure out how your clients think. All right? Rock on, man. See ya.